With the Nintendo eShop for 3DS and Wii U being shut down very soon, a lot of games will no longer be buyable digital anymore, and therefore much harder to access. This includes what is, in my opinion, the best Monster Hunter game. Monster Hunter 4 was released in 2013 in Japan, with its expansion releasing in 2014 and the Western version releasing in 2015. It was the start of the 4th generation of Monster Hunter. It introduced 2 new weapons, the ability to mount monsters, and the whole game has a huge emphasis on verticality, with the hunter having much better mobility than ever before. I first played 4 Ultimate in 2017, and it struck a chord with me. I've played many Monster Hunter games since then, but to this day, 4 Ultimate has reigned supreme in my eyes, even after replaying it. In this video, I will be discussing the legacy of 4 Ultimate, its impact on the rest of the series, and why it still holds up as the best Monster Hunter game. Ultimate has one of the most impressive monster rosters in the entire series, capping off at 75 large monsters, making it one of the biggest Monster Hunter games to date. The quantity alone is fantastic, but the quality is something else. Many classic monsters are present. Rathalos, Tigrex, Zinogre and Brachydios are all fantastic monsters, but 4's new additions are great too. Take the Quechahuacha, a fanged beast that can swing from branches and blast water at you, or the Zamtrios, a giant shark that can coat himself with icy armour and inflate himself to comical proportions. Then there's the Nasyla, the very first spider monster, capable of trapping you in webs and swinging around. Then you have the Celtis, one of the first proper large bug monsters in the series. You encounter him early in the game and he's not much of a threat, but later you encounter the Celtis Queen, who is much larger and deadlier. The two can even work together, with the Queen holding the smaller Celtis and using him for attacks. The game straight up begins with you encountering a giant sand whale known as the Daran Moran, and the game's introduction has you repel him, teasing him as someone you can later defeat for real. We also have returning monsters from games like Freedom Unite and 3 Ultimate. The Gravios, Kongalala, Deviljur and Rajang for instance, but also some of the most challenging monsters too, Koshala Deora, Teostra, the Akantor Yukanlos, as well as many more. The expansion also brings back Chameleos. We also have to talk about Gore Magala, the game's flagship monster. He has an incredible design, with wings resembling a dark cloak. He has the ability to inflict a deadly virus upon the hunter that is also central to the game's plot and some of its mechanics. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him from Sunbreak, but this is the game where he originated from. Because of all these monsters, there's a huge variety in what you are actually fighting. This helps keep the game fresh, as the monsters feel very different from each other, which makes 4 Ultimate feel incredibly diverse. What truly enhances Monster Hunter 4's roster in my opinion is the inclusion of subspecies. Most Monster Hunter games have them, but they usually opt to include them in the expansion, rarely ever in the base game. For example, Monster Hunter Tri had 0 subspecies and World only had 3, with their later entries reintroducing old subspecies as well as bringing in brand new ones. 4's inclusion of subspecies allowed for very interesting progression throughout the game. Low rank allows you to encounter monsters such as Rathian or Zinogre. You encounter these monsters, learn how to beat them, maybe grind them for their armor and weapons and move on. Then high rank introduces new challenges in the form of subspecies. You now have to face off against alternate versions of these monsters who are different enough that they spice up the fight with alternate attacks and strategies. For example, the pink Rathian has different attacks with different properties to Rathian that cover her blind spots and make her much tougher. The brute Tigrex focuses more on roaring and less on charging, which makes fighting him feel quite a bit different to Tigrex. The base monsters are still present in high rank, and of course, there are still original monsters to encounter, but the subspecies help alleviate a big problem in the lots of Monster Hunter games, where you fight the monsters in low rank and then go on to fight the exact same ones in high rank. This is actually a problem I had with base Monster Hunter Rise. 4's inclusion of subspecies really helps add to the game's content without feeling like artificial padding. Speaking of avoiding padding, Monster Hunter 4 also does this by locking certain monsters behind expeditions, but we will get to that later. Late high rank also has rare species and variants, such as the Molten Tigrex or the Metal Wraths, while also featuring dangerous elder dragons like the Koshala Deora, the high rank Daran Moran, and even monsters like Fatalis or Crimson Fatalis. Then there's the game's final boss, a colossal snake known as the Dalamadur, who is one of the coolest final bosses in the entire series. G-Rank takes things further, not only introducing new monsters from older games and their subspecies, but also subspecies of the new monsters introduced in Monster Hunter 4. Those who battled against the Tetsukabra and Zamtrios in low rank will now come face to face with the Berserk Tetsukabra and the Tiger Stripe Zamtrios. Late G-Rank introduces variations like the chaotic Gore Magala as well as the Raging Brachydios. There's even a subspecies of the Dalamadeur. Prior to 4 Ultimate, subspecies were pretty much just slightly harder versions of their base forms, maybe a bit faster or a new combo here and there. The 3rd generation of Monster Hunter really spiced them up by having many of them use a different element to the base monster. 4 goes above and beyond by giving them major strengths by buffing existing attributes. The best example of this is Tiger Stripe Zamtrios. The base form can coat himself with icy armor when enraged, but he can also inflate himself to try and crush you. This form ends up being a giant weakness, as Zamtrios moves around so slowly and he's so big that every attack he does can be seen coming from a mile away, and it becomes incredibly easy to hit him. Tiger Stripe Zamtrios lives in the desert, and due to the intense heat, he cannot use the armor of his base form. Instead, he uses his inflated form with much greater skill, being able to enter and exit quickly and jump around swiftly with it. This effectively turns Zamtrios' biggest weakness into Tiger Stripe's biggest strength. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate already has one of the most well-rounded monster rosters to date, and the inclusion of subspecies in both the base game and expansion help bolster the existing content without padding it out too much. The way they are organised throughout the game helps keep the experience constantly fresh as the player progresses and experiences new challenges and new spins on old ones. G-Rank continues to bring the heat with unique variations of already unique monsters as well as some of the most challenging monsters from the older games, and this results in the game's challenge and difficulty rising at a steady pace. Monster Hunter 4 features a lot of content to experience that is both related and unrelated to hunting monsters. Earlier I touched upon the expeditions. These take place in the Everwood, which is a procedurally generated map encountered in the game. Every time you enter, it is randomly generated with a wide variety of different areas you can explore, gather, and of course hunt monsters. Almost the entire roster can appear here. However, there are also monsters completely exclusive to the Everwood that can only be encountered in expeditions. These are mostly classic monsters like the Uncut Coup, the Velocidrome, Basarios, as well as challenging monsters like the young Garuga, the Kirin, and even the White Monoblos in G-Rank. Having these monsters exclusive to the Everwood serves a few purposes. They avoid bloating the game's main quests, which helps streamline the game's pacing while maintaining a big monster roster. But they also provide players with a reason to engage with expeditions. Knowing that there are exclusive monsters to be hunted there makes it more enticing and serves to make the area more unique. To some, having these monsters locked behind RNG can be irksome, but the game also gives you ways to grind them without relying on RNG. More on that later. Another form of the great content Monster Hunter 4 has consists of harder optional quests that you can complete. At first, this doesn't sound too unique. Many Monster Hunter games have these, but what makes 4 so great is the introduction of the Frenzy Virus. Monster Hunter 4 is the very first game in the series to introduce enhanced monster states. Gore Magala's virus can infect monsters, causing them to become frenzied. When this happens, they turn a dark shade of purple and their attacks become faster and stronger, which substantially raises the difficulty. But what makes them even harder is that they can inflict the virus onto you as well. When this happens, a gauge appears on the screen, slowly filling up, and when full, your healing capabilities are nerfed. But if you can deal enough damage, you can overcome the virus, which increases your affinity. This is a fantastic mechanic as it raises the difficulty of the monsters in substantial, meaningful ways, but also rewards the player for being good at the game. The expansion introduced special items called Y-Stones, which add special frenzy suppressing properties to your weapons and need cooldowns to recharge. If you deal enough damage with a Y-Stone active, then you can straight up suppress the monster's frenzy, reverting them back to normal for a while, which further rewards skillful hunting. This is a mechanic that clearly inspired Sunbreak's endgame monsters. The expansion also introduced Apex monsters, who managed to overcome the virus and become stronger. They have new attacks, faster speed, higher damage, and your attacks will bounce off their weak points unless you use a special Y-Stone. These are some of the most challenging hunts in the game, taking already difficult monsters and elevating them. The Apex monsters have a fun dynamic where you avoid their deadly attacks and deal as much damage as possible to suppress the frenzy, using that period of time as a breather before the virus resurfaces and the fight ramps up again. With these challenging hunts, you might be wondering, what exactly is the point of doing them? Aside from the quest rewards and the thrill of the fight obviously. Well my friends, let me tell you all about the Wiporium. The Wiporium is a new facility in Monster Hunter 4. It's used for villager requests and item multiplication, but it also serves a very special purpose: trading monster parts. Monster Hunter 4 and its expansion have 75 total monsters, including new and old monsters from the other games. However, it is missing several monsters from across the series. A lot of 3rd generation monsters are not in the game, as well as certain 2nd gen monsters. The Wiporium lets you trade in monster materials from this game in exchange for materials from monsters not in the game. You can exchange Jaggy parts for those of Azora's, who is not in Monster Hunter 4. You can trade Teostra parts to obtain Lunastras. You can use those parts to make the weapons and armor from those monsters. So you can make Nagakuga's armor and weapons in 4, despite him not being in the game. Same with Lagiacrus. Some time ago, I made a video talking about monsters that are quote unquote forgotten and haven't been fightable in Monster Hunter for a long time. While in 4, you can obtain a lot of their equipment. In some cases, the developers even made original weapons, such as the Ceadeus Charge Blade, that did not exist in 3 Ultimate. Now, most of these trades can be unlocked by completing the challenging hunts discussed earlier. Take the quest Naked and Afraid, which forces you to fight 2 Devil Joes with no armor. Completing it unlocks high rank Ceadeus trades from the Wiporium. Akantor Ku faces you off against a permanently enraged Akantor and unlocks you Canlos parts. This is one of the most genius rewards in the entire series. Having these materials unlockable provides fantastic incentives for players to engage with the harder challenges. It also helps with set variety, providing a whole other series of armor sets and weapons to obtain and craft, and it's great for people who are sad that their favourite monster isn't in the game. Are you a big fan of Uragaan? First of all, why? Second of all, if you can defeat a frenzied Emerald Kongalala, Celta's Queen and Celtas to unlock the ability to trade Gravios parts, you can make Uragaan's armor and weapons. To this day, the Wiporium trade is one of the best unlockables I've seen in a Monster Hunter game. It massively enhances set variety, gives you a great incentive to face some of the most challenging quests in the game, gives you incentives to grind monsters you wouldn't otherwise fight, and pleases fans of certain monsters who may have been disappointed at their exclusion from the game. If you get tired of hunting and need a break, the expansion features a facility called the Assembly, where you can listen to music sung by the diva. It's not exciting or super hype or anything, but it's nice to do while your hunting buddy is AFK and you're just chilling waiting for them to return. Several songs are actually unlockable through quests, including Ceadeus' theme. Monster Hunter 4 is the very first game in the series to feature actual dedicated post-games. The definition of a post-game is essentially any activities that can be done after the game is completed. In previous Monster Hunter games, the post-game simply consisted of hunting whatever you wanted, maybe going for a few hidden unlockable bosses, all until you got bored and put the game down, which was fine enough at the time. But the 3rd generation took things a step further by introducing hunter rank level breaks, where you could start leveling up your hunter rank without being tied to quest ranks all the way to hunter rank 999. 3 Ultimate continued the trend in G rank, having special challenge quests that unlocked at set HR levels but also exclusive post-game monsters. Monster Hunter 4 has the HR grind as well, but this time the quests often have special variations. I touched on this briefly, but the quests often alter the monster's AI to make them much harder. Take the Akantor. When he gets enraged, he can inflict you with defense down if you are hit by any bite attack, which completely cuts it in half, putting you at severe risk of dying. The post-game quest unlocked at HR 60, Akantor Ku, not only increases his damage and health, but it also has him stay permanently enraged for the entire fight, making the quest significantly harder. The Darren Moran fight has you battle a giant sand whale, protecting your ship from incoming attacks. Occasionally, you can board him and do extra damage, and after Darren reaches a certain health threshold, you enter the final phase, which has him slowly approach your ship as you try and stop him. In the HR 40 quest, More Moran, he has adjusted AI, so that he does not let you board him at all, which significantly inhibits the amount of damage you can deal to him, as you now have to exclusively battle him with the ship's installations, which are less than ideal. making the quest much more challenging by forcing you to rethink your approach. Those are just 2 quests, others also have special modifiers, and they make the monsters harder in ways that go beyond just increasing their health and calling it a day. The expansion retains your unlocked HR cap, so that when you reach the post-game of G rank, they do not have another set of quests to unlock based on HR. Instead, the ancient scroll system is introduced. In universe, these are secret messages that pertain to powerful threats within the world, and the way to unlock them is simply by hunting monsters. The higher tier the quest, the more glyphs are deciphered, and eventually the message is revealed, which unlocks a quest. Several endgame monsters can be fought this way, including G-rank versions of monsters encountered at HR7, Apex monsters, and once again, existing monsters with altered statistics. For example, the quest Wings of Woe features a chaotic Gore Magala, not just with more health and attack power, but starting off in the frenzy mode from the very beginning, making the fight much harder. At the end of the day, the scroll system isn't anything too special. It's just a neat way of unlocking quests when your HR has already been unlocked, thus providing unlockables for those who might have reached HR 909 in the base game. While this is all very cool, it's actually not the only post-game system Monster Hunter 4 has. When returning home from expeditions after slaying monsters, you can receive special quests known as guild quests. Guild quests take place in the Everwood, and have to be registered before you can undertake them. They have levels to them, and upon completing the quest you can raise the level, which also raises the quest difficulty. Usually they have preset levels depending on what rank you obtain the quest in. As the quest level becomes higher, they will slowly become harder. I was grinding a Devil Joe, and at some point he would start becoming frenzied. Eventually, invading monsters may start to appear. One time, an already charged Zinogre showed up, and on another occasion, a frenzied Tigrex invaded the quest. One of my Stygian Zinogre quests was invaded by a simple Velocidrome, so there's a lot of variety on who can show up. At level 136, the invading monster stops showing up, and the monster becomes even harder. If they can become Apex then they will, and any other special properties will be enhanced. For example, Teostra's fire aura will cover his whole entire body. The monster's damage is heavily inflated, so the point 2 hits will probably kill you. The level 140 guild quests are some of the toughest challenges in all of Monster Hunter. I highly recommend watching some speedruns on YouTube to witness some incredibly skilled play. Now all of this sounds like a massive difficult grind, so why do it? Well, completing guild quests can net you relics, special armor and equipment that can be obtained randomly and is often much stronger than anything you can obtain in the game. The harder the monster, the better your relic, so while you are potentially battling the strongest possible thing in the game, the reward you could obtain is often exponentially better than anything you can craft. Because guild quests can be done in multiplayer, they can make for incredibly fun pastimes to do with your friends. The best part, you can send your guild quests for them to keep, as well as any other random person. So if yours is better than theirs, you can simply share it with them and they can grind it in their own time. The caveat is that they will receive the quest at the level it initially started with, so they have to grind it all again. But this isn't so bad since the guild quests have a catch-up system where they'll level up faster to reach a similar level equivalent to the hunter's HR. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate has yet another form of post-game grinding. Weapon honing. Using special gems that can only be obtained from Apex monsters, you can apply special upgrades to your gear. You can boost its attack, give it a defense bonus, or lifesteal properties. It's great for giving your weapon a slight edge in battle, and a good reward for beating the Apex monsters. These post-game grinds provide incredible longevity to 4 Ultimate. There is truly something for every kind of player here. Those who want to fight more and more monsters and just obtain the gear they want until they get bored of the game can raise their hunter rank and decipher the ancient texts to battle monsters like the Raging Brachydios or the Shard d'Alamadeur. Those who want stronger gear and are willing to fight stronger monsters can battle the Apex monsters to hone their weapons to get a slight boost. And those who love the big, long, endless, challenging grinds have the guild quests, where they can endlessly hunt for the best gear in the game while fighting the strongest monsters the game has to offer. Each endgame is equally valid and perfectly suited for the type of player who would go for them. There's something for everyone in this game. Monster Hunter plots are never anything to write home about. Most of them are really basic and not very memorable. Monster Hunter 3 and 3 Ultimate attempted a more in-depth narrative that even featured a plot twist, but again it was very basic. Monster Hunter 4's plot blows it out of the water. It begins with you travelling on a ship on the way to the city of Valhalla, meeting an old man called the Caravaneer, where you discuss with him your goals in journeying there. You want to become a hunter, and before he can tell you his goal, your ship is attacked by the Darren Moran, which causes the Caravaneer's hat to fly off. After rescuing his hat and repelling the Elder Dragon, thus saving Valhalla from complete destruction, he reveals he keeps an important object in there, a shiny scale he calls the Article. He informs you that he came to Valhalla because he wants to find its origins, and to do that, he wants to assemble a team, a caravan of sorts. He has a blacksmith and quest receptionist with him, but he needs more members, a merchant to handle finances, a cook to keep everyone fed, and of course, a hunter to protect the caravan from any threats they encounter. He decides to recruit you and helps you get to grips with the game. After assembling a crew, you travel across the world. For the first time in this series, we visit multiple different villages. Each one is affected by different problems that you help solve in exchange for help on your journey. During the story, you encounter the Gore Magala and his virus, and witness its effects on the monsters throughout the world. The Gore Magala and the artifact are linked, and both are relevant to the final boss. What makes Monster Hunter 4's story so good compared to other Monster Hunter games is how the story feels connected to the game itself. In previous Monster Hunter games, you'd rank up and unlock different areas in each rank, but in Monster Hunter 4 as you rank up, you travel to each village, which are in very close proximity to their respective maps. In the early ranks, you are in the village of Valhalla, with quests taking place in the Ancestral Steppe. In the next rank, you travel to the miners' village of Hearth, in order to build a ship to sail the sea, and the quests related to Hearth take place in the Sunken Hollow, an inactive volcano. Later, you get shipwrecked and end up in the village of Chico Sands, and the quests take place in the Primal Forest. Because of this, it feels like you're actually exploring the world, rather than simply unlocking new areas. When I played Portable 3rd, my second Monster Hunter game, I was quite surprised when Yukoma Village was the only one in the game, because it implies that this hunter is travelling from the village to all these different maps in the game, which doesn't feel as realistic or satisfying. Monster Hunter 4's story also attempts to connect more than just urgent quests to the game's plot. After arriving in Hearth, you are given key quests to hunt a Tetsukabra and a Gypsaros. You need to beat the Tetsukabra because it's preventing miners from accessing ore in the volcano. Your caravan's blacksmith, known as the Man, gives you the quest to hunt Gypsaros as its rubbery hide is perfect for shipbuilding, which is what the caravan needs to cross the sea. These are just a few examples. Monster Hunter 4's plot is fantastic because it actually takes the effort to give good reasons as to why you're hunting these monsters. You feel like you're always working towards something, and the game has so many surprises in store. The plot revolves around Gore Magala and stopping him and his virus from ravaging the world, and this is actually incorporated into the gameplay. After Gore's initial defeat, you realise something is still up because you start encountering frenzied monsters everywhere, which leads to the showdown against the final boss. The danger of the frenzied monsters show the real consequences of what happens if you don't defeat it. A great example of show don't tell. 4 Ultimate's plot revolves around the consequences of the virus, as well as protecting the city of Dundorma from arrested Kushala Daora. One thing this game does that no other Monster Hunter game before it did, is actively involve your hunter in the monster introductions. You can watch your hunter scout around and encounter the monsters you're about to fight, which really makes you feel like a part of the game's world and story. It's also worth briefly talking about the cast of characters. While basic, they are very well written and can be quite endearing. You really find yourself caring about characters like the Caravaneer or the Guildmom. This game also introduces the Ace Hunters, side characters who are relatively involved with the plots of both the base game and the expansion. They're pretty cool, and some of them have even shown up in later media, like Monster Hunter World or Legends of the Guild. 4 Ultimate's writing is also really funny. They put a lot of effort into the localization here. I particularly love the various questlines in the game. One such questline starts off with the Guildmom informing you that she once met someone while travelling near a volcano and fell in love. She particularly notes his strong arms and explosive personality. She gives you a quest to find and tell him about her feelings. The quest is to hunt a Brachydios. After completing the quest, the Ace Commander informs you that the Ace Cadet has fallen for the Guildmom, and is now trying to hunt difficult monsters to impress her. The Commander reckons he is going to get his ass handed to him, and to prevent that has made a plan to distract him with various tasks while you hunt the monsters before he can. And this results in some humorous moments, like the Commander informing the Cadet that he has forgotten how to use dual swords, his signature weapon. This is one of many well written questlines in the game, and they often lead to difficult encounters with monsters usually encountered in the Gathering Hall, such as Rajang. There's a questline which involves an egg poaching syndicate, where residents of each village give you quests to carry eggs from areas of the maps all the way to camp, often being chased by monsters. In universe, this is actually illegal, and it's wild seeing the different NPCs who are in on the conspiracy. The final quest leads to a bizarre plot twist that I will not spoil, because it's really funny to experience for the first time. 4 Ultimate's plot is nothing too crazy. Do not go in expecting Final Fantasy or anything like that. But for a Monster Hunter game, it goes above and beyond, and to this day it is probably the best plot we've ever seen compared to games like Rise or World. The characters are fairly developed with their own motivations, the world feels realised and very connected, and the overall plot is quite satisfying. The various questlines within the game help to show more sides to the characters and world, and the plot connects to the game very well. I think Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate is the best game in the series. Better than 3, better than Generations, better than World, and better than Rise. In this segment of the video, I will explain why that is, and why it's still worth playing compared to them. Compared to Generations Ultimate, 4U has around 18 less monsters, so on paper, GU has more content. However, GU is missing many monsters that were in 4 Ultimate. Every subspecies is absent, which is a shame because some of them are really fun like Stygian Zinogre, but it's also missing monsters such as Monoblos, as well as some really cool large monster battles like Darren Moran, Dalamadur or Gogmazios. In addition to this, much of what was discussed about 4 Ultimate is not present in Generations Ultimate, the endgame systems in particular. Weapon honing is absent, and the HR grind is not much of a thing until G rank. There are no frenzied monsters either. There are no procedurally generated systems like the expeditions or the guild quests either, so GU's endgame is more or less just hunting for the gear you want until you get bored. This isn't a bad thing, in fact it's great in GU because of the sheer volume of monsters it has. There is so much content to experience. Which leads to another problem, pacing and padding. You see, 4 Ultimate has less monsters, and many of them are exclusive to the Everwood. The result of this is that progressing through the game feels focused. Each quest rank takes a few quests to clear through before you progress, each monster you fight feels distinct, and the game presents them to you at an even pace. Because Generations Ultimate is the expansion of a title that was made to celebrate 10 years of Monster Hunter, it tried to cram in as many monsters as possible. The result of this is that the game is almost too big and the pacing suffers as a result. The early game of GU is notoriously bad, filled with some of the worst early game monsters and tons of gathering quests. With the exception of deviant monsters, everything can be fought in the main quests, so as a result, there are dozens upon dozens of quests, and without a guide, it's often really hard to find out which ones are necessary to progress through the game. Generations does not have much of a story either, which makes progressing much less interesting than 4 Ultimate. All of this makes playing through the game feel like a massive slog until you start reaching the flagship monsters. The content bloat problem doesn't end with the monsters however. Generations Ultimate is also crammed with so many locales to hunt in from all across the series, which feels great at first because presumably there will be variety, but the end result is that each map feels much less distinct than it should. We do not need 4 different forests in one game. GU has the same issue I had with earlier Monster Hunter games, where these maps are presented to you without rhyme or reason. You unlock the next rank, here is a desert. You unlocked another, here is a volcano and a mountain. Another issue is that because these maps come from so many different games in the series, their designs often clash. You can tell exactly which maps are from the 2nd generation compared to the 4th, due to graphical differences as well as the overall geography. And because there are so many maps, memorizing the layout for each one can often be really difficult. GU keeps certain maps exclusive to high-end G rank, which can help ease players in, but that leads to the issue of high rank sending players to random locations upon starting quests. And because you have around 5 new maps to deal with, players not already familiar with them will find themselves completely lost. 4 Ultimate has 5 maps total, and less monsters overall, but this leads to a much more focused experience, with a much better sense of progression. The smaller but still large monster roster lets each monster stand out, and you can obtain the gear from monsters not in the game too. It has fewer maps, but that simply means each one stands out on its own a lot more, and it's much easier to learn the layouts and shortcuts of each one. 4 Ultimate actually brings back a map from the very first game, the desert. However, it fully remakes it, taking the design philosophy from the other maps and updating it. And if you didn't know any better, you would assume it was completely original. In short, I find 4 Ultimate better than Generations Ultimate because it does more with less. The big thing Monster Hunter 4 has over World is variety. World might look prettier and play a lot smoother, but it severely lacks variation in its monster roster. Let's compare monster types in Monster Hunter 4 versus World. Lizard, Lizard, Dinosaur, Toad, Shark, Snake, Spider, Fish, Lizard, Dinosaur, Wolf, Whale, Bug, Chameleon, Rabbit, and so on. World's lack of monster variety could be down to technical limitations or design choices, but the fact of the matter is, 4's diverse monsters make the cast feel super distinct, whereas much of World's roster doesn't really stand out to me. Iceborne did slightly solve this problem by bringing in some really unique monsters, such as Bambaro, a giant moose brute wyvern, and Namiel, a squid-like elder dragon. Unfortunately, it also brought in entirely new problems, more on that later. One of the reasons World fans should give 4 Ultimate a try is because World is actually the sequel to 4. World is a main series Monster Hunter game, as is 4 Ultimate, while Rise and Generations are portable series Monster Hunter games. The same development team behind 4 Ultimate went on to make World. This means that the games have some major similarities, and many gameplay concepts that are in World are also in 4 Ultimate. Both games have a heavy emphasis on plot, by Monster Hunter standards anyway. You, the hunter, are pretty much the centre of the story, and are featured in many cutscenes that have the same style. Both begin with the player being attacked by a giant elder dragon. Both games incorporate key questions of the story, giving you legitimate personal reasons for taking down each monster. I praised Monster Hunter 4 for how unlocking new locales was integrated into its story. World does the exact same thing, where new areas are shown to the player as the hunter and handler explore the new world. The maps also have similar design philosophies, where they are geographically varied, often having ledges and slopes everywhere. Even certain plot elements in World and Iceborne feel like developed ideas they had in 4 Ultimate. For example, the Gore Magala survives his battle with you and evolves into the Shigaru Magala. World's final boss Xenojiva is ambiguously defeated, that is until Iceborne, where Safi Jiva, the evolved adult form of Xenojiva, comes into play. In the story of 4 Ultimate, Rusted Kushala threatens the city of Dundorma, and in the final story quest, you're tasked with repelling him. Later on in the G-Rank Gathering Hub quests, you get to kill him for real. A similar thing happened with Ruin and Nergigante, who played a big role in the second half of Iceborne's story and could only be killed at MR100, deep into the post-game. Many gameplay elements in World also made their start in 4. The expeditions being used to unlock random quests later became the investigation system in World, where you could complete quests with random properties for better rewards. World also has an enhanced monster state that is also tied in with the story in the form of tempered monsters, and they took the basic premise of weapon honing and turned it into augmentations. There is even an RNG weapons grind with the Call of Taroth Siege. Arch-tempered monsters are the equivalent of apexes. One of my favourite examples of ideas being shared across games is the intro cutscene for 4 Ultimate, where a lot of things that happen in this cutscene cannot actually happen in the game itself. Eating at camp, dynamic day and night cycles, turf wars, 3 monsters on a map. They can't happen in 4 Ultimate, but they can happen in World. It shows that the developers were playing around with ideas very early on and got to incorporate them in their next game. If you are a fan of World, it is worth playing 4 Ultimate. Much of what you liked about that game is present here, and it's really cool seeing the ideas that showed up in World in their early forms, many of which are better executed here. Monster Hunter Rise was developed for the Nintendo Switch and designed to be a very portable game compared to World. The player has dog companions called Palamutes in order to travel around the map at a fast pace. Monsters are displayed on the map at all times, so the player can waste no time searching for them. The game also slightly reduced the amount of preparation needed for quests by removing the need for hot and cold drinks. The monsters' health pools were also balanced for portable play. The game is very fast and streamlined, completely cutting the busy work out between accepting a quest and fighting the monster, and the combat is the fastest it's ever been. While these changes work well within Rise, many believe them to be a harsh departure from what Monster Hunter is about. Preparation for quests has historically been a huge part of the series, and some feel like being able to see any monster on the map all the time trivializes parts of the game too. Above all else, they feel as though the extremely fast pace of the game and its combat is not something that fits Monster Hunter and makes it feel much easier than it should be. Monster Hunter 4 is exclusive to the 3DS, a portable system, and like with Rise, the developers made certain design choices to keep the game suitable for shorter sessions. A big example of this is the monster health, which is much lower than the other games in the series. This means that fights can often be brief, ending in roughly 15 minutes or less. However, if you think this makes the game easier, you would be mistaken, because monsters in this game hit harder and move faster than the other games. 4 Ultimate also retains the preparation and other things that Rise cut. All of this shows that it is possible to create a portable Monster Hunter game without sacrificing many gameplay elements that are a core part of Monster Hunter. 4 Ultimate is still difficult, but the fights are short and sweet, and above all, it still feels like a Monster Hunter game with the preparation, the slower, more deliberate combat, and the difficulty the series is known for. I don't think Rise had to make all those changes to be a good portable experience, when 4 Ultimate already succeeded. Sunbreak is actually my second favourite Monster Hunter game, and it's clear it took a lot of inspiration from 4 Ultimate. 4 Ultimate still reigns supreme however, because its high rank is much better than Rise, and its Hunter rank grind is vastly superior, as well as having a better selection of subspecies. There is also one major thing that makes me return to 4 Ultimate a lot, one thing it has compared to the newer Monster Hunter games, or rather, one thing it doesn't have. Rise has wire bugs, allowing you to swing around the map and in combat. Generations Ultimate has the hunting styles and arts, allowing for 6 different ways to approach combat. Iceborne brought in the Clutch Claw, letting you grapple onto monsters and weaken their body parts, as well as slam them into walls. All of these things centralize the combat heavily on unleashing Silkbind attacks, Hunter art, and tenderizing. Ultimately, they're gimmicks, some fun and some awful. Monster Hunter 4 has nothing like that. It's just you, your weapon, and the monster. No crazy swinging or special moves, just raw combat. This makes 4 Ultimate very refreshing to return to, as the lack of gimmicks ironically make it different from the newer games. This alone doesn't make 4 Ultimate better than them, but it's certainly a reason to give it a try. 4 Ultimate's combat having no gimmicks makes it feel much more about skill, and your own capabilities compared to GU and Rise, where it feels more about gimmicking the monster with special moves. World's combat was actually more like 4's in the base game, until Iceborne introduced the Clutch Claw, which ruined the combat for me completely, as it became centralized upon wallbangs and tenderizing, which I don't find very fun at all. Again, having no gimmicks doesn't necessarily make 4 Ultimate better than the other games, but it makes it a fantastic raw Monster Hunter experience that is very much worth playing today. Okay, so I've spent this whole video praising 4 Ultimate up and down, so for the sake of balance as well as honesty, we should go touch upon some flaws that 4 Ultimate has. Firstly, it's lacking many of the quality of life improvements seen in later games, particularly in Generations. For example, when gathering items or carving, you have to press the A button individually for every item, you can't simply hold it down. There are also other things like being able to remove all decorations from your equipment at once, which isn't a thing in 4 Ultimate, so you have to search all your gear for that one item, another thing GU and later games fixed. You cannot join hunters already on a quest, which can make joining random hubs a bit frustrating, as you will often arrive in their hub only to find they departed 10 seconds ago. When searching for hubs, the search list doesn't let you filter out hubs where the participants are on a quest, which makes it harder to find something suitable. You can't name your hubs either. The game has segmented maps with areas divided by loading zones. While they aren't bad on their own, they can be really bad in the heat of combat, constantly being interrupted as you get knocked into the next zone. Speaking of map design, 4 Ultimate has an emphasis on verticality, and your hunter was more mobile than ever before in this game. To emphasize this, the maps were designed with hills and ledges for the hunters to perform jumping attacks. The problem is that fighting monsters in these areas can often be a giant pain. It can be hard to dodge and move around with ledges everywhere, and sometimes the monster can be obscured too. At the time, 4 Ultimate had the best camera controls ever seen in the series, with free horizontal and vertical camera movement. However, it hasn't aged too well, due to the fact it can only go in 4 directions, up, down, left and right, which can be difficult to adjust to if you are used to the later games. The 3DS lacks a second analog stick, and while you can buy an add-on, there is no way to control the camera unless you use a virtual D-pad on the touchscreen, which is less than ideal. So not only is the camera very stiff, but it can be difficult to control too. Gathering hub monsters have no health scaling, and thus can take a while to beat if you're alone. This isn't too bad in 4 Ultimate, because health pools are generally smaller than the other games, but for some specific monsters it can be downright horrific. Then there are more specific problems tied to the endgame systems. Some didn't like how certain monsters were exclusive to the Everwood, as it made it harder to seek them out to farm them. Monsters like Savage Deviljho did not have any quests available in G rank, and White Monoblos was only available single player in the Everwood. As a result, farming them took a lot of time. Event quests fixed this problem with monsters like Savage Deviljho, but at launch, there was the issue of certain monsters being event quest exclusive. Silver Rathalos, Gold Rathian, Dalamadur and Fatalis were all on the cartridge with their gear and everything, yet could not be fought until their respective quests were released. This did reduce bloat in the main quest slightly, but it was not nice waiting for Capcom to release content that already existed. While guild quests let you farm relics from pretty much any high level monster in the endgame, certain monsters will give you the best chance at getting multiple relics: Apex Rajang, Deviljho and Diablos. This means that to an extent, farming anyone else like Apex Zinogre, Tigrex, or even elder dragons like Chameleos can be seen as a waste of time. Some have dubbed this game Apex Rajang Hunter 4 Ultimate for this reason. Speaking of the Apex monsters, some feel as though they are unnecessarily difficult. They are immune to traps and statuses, and because their body parts are hardened, your weapon will bounce off unless you use a certain Y-stone. And while we're on that topic, let's discuss them, shall we? Well, for one, Y-stones are only unlocked after beating certain single player village quests. Those who only did the multiplayer with their friends will straight up not have access to them until they do so, which makes fighting the Apex monsters close to impossible. In addition to this, the Y-stones themselves are kind of bad. They last for a limited time, but their cooldown recharge lasts even longer. So if your Y-stone runs out, you need to wait a while before being able to use it again, which effectively turns them into a DPS check. The way Risen Dragons work in Sunbreak feels like a massive improvement, where you don't need a special item, just your own skill. The Wyporium took some slight criticism, purely because you'd have to grind certain monsters twice as hard. Obtaining Nagakuga and Zinogre armor would require you to just farm Zinogre for hours on end to get enough materials to both craft as armor and trade in as parts for Naga's gear too. It also sucks when a monster whose gear you love is locked behind someone you hate fighting. Mounting was new to this game, and as a result slightly unbalanced. The result of this is that it became very easy to mount the monster, which made it quite overpowered with all the ledges everywhere. But what's worse is that it is possible to knock someone off their mount if you attack the monster during it. This was changed in Generations. Speaking of overpowered new things, the Charge Blade and Insect Glaive were new additions to this game and are far and beyond the best weapons. Insect Glaive has incredible damage per second, and Charge Blade can inflict devastating counters upon anything it runs into. Then there is, in my opinion, Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate's biggest problem, that still plagues it to this day. It is 3DS exclusive and can only legally be played on the 3DS. And when the Nintendo eShop shuts down in a few days, it can no longer be legally bought first hand, which makes it fairly inaccessible for a lot of people. For me, this is really sad, because I truly believe it is the best Monster Hunter game, and that every fan should try and experience it. So what is to be done about this? Please Capcom, make 4 Ultimate available to play on modern platforms. Not just the Switch, but PC, Xbox and PlayStation 2. We've discussed many of the flaws in 4 Ultimate, but the truth is that a remaster could pretty much fix all of them, making the game near perfect for a lot of people, myself included. The topic of remastering old Monster Hunter games is something I've wanted to touch on for a while, especially because 3 Ultimate is also going down. This video is getting way too long for my liking, so it's a topic for another time. I believe Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate to this day is the best game in the series. It has a huge amount of content without the game feeling padded or bloated. There is so much stuff to see, do and unlock. With all the different endgame systems for any kind of player, the game has incredible longevity. I strongly believe to this day that the frenzied monsters are the best enhanced state they've come up with. The story, while not amazing, is among the best of any Monster Hunter game. 4 Ultimate's gameplay is also wonderful, and its lack of gimmicks makes it refreshing to play next to games like Iceborne and Rise. For this reason, I think everyone should try and experience it. After the 27th of March, you will only be able to purchase it physically. Note that you'll still be able to play it after March 23rd, but it might be harder to legally obtain. and I'm not sure how long online servers will stay up after the shops have gone down. 4 Ultimate is my first and favourite game in the series. I strongly felt like it was the best game, and to make sure, I replayed the entire thing recently, just to make sure first game bias wasn't clouding my judgment. But no, it turns out 4 Ultimate really is as good as I remember. The idea of nobody being able to legally play this anymore makes me quite sad, and so I hope it can be remastered for modern platforms in the future. In the meantime, the best we can do is play the 3DS version as much as we can. Thank you for watching this video. It's probably my biggest yet, it took a lot of effort to make and put together, and so I would really appreciate it if you shared with as many of your Monster Hunter friends as possible. It was supposed to come out last year, but I got really busy. This game means a lot to me, and I hope this video convinces people to try playing it. It truly is one of, if not the best Monster Hunter game of all time. Remember to like and subscribe, and check out my other videos too.